7 days. 7 days she had been watching me from the eastern ridge. I knew someone was there. 30 years of surviving war and frontier life had taught me that much. The way the birds change their pattern near those rocks, the faint glint of sun on metal at dawn, the feeling that crawls up your spine when eyes are fixed on your back. But I did nothing about it. 3 years of solitude had made me careless. Or maybe I just did not care anymore. My name is Jacob Hartwell, 42 years old, former Sergeant, Union Army. I fought at Shiloh, where I watched 20 boys under my command become 7 in 2 days. The screams of dying men still echo in my dreams. The smell of blood and gunpowder still fills my nostrils when the wind blows a certain way. I fought at Gettysburg. I fought at Cold Harbor, where a Confederate bullet shattered my right leg. The Army surgeons wanted to take the leg. A stubborn field nurse fought for me. I kept the leg, but it never worked right again. I walk with a limp now. Some days the pain is bearable. Most days it is not. When they discharged me in '66, I had nowhere to go. Parents dead. No wife, no children. The farm I grew up on sold to pay debts. So I came west to Montana Territory, where a man could disappear if he wanted to. And I wanted to. I built a cabin on 200 acres of land that nobody else wanted. I raised cattle. I avoided the town of Silver Creek and its people. I spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. For 3 years, this worked. For 3 years, I found something close to peace. Then she came down from the ridge. I was repairing a fence post when I heard her horse approaching. My hand moved to the colt on my hip before I even turned around. Old habits, the kind that keep you alive. She stopped her horse 10 yards away and dismounted in one fluid motion. Apache. I recognized the clothing, the way she carried herself. I had served with Apache scouts during my final year in the Army. Good men, loyal to the unit. They taught me their language, their ways of reading the land. This woman was perhaps 28, with sharp cheekbones and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light. A thin scar ran along her jawline. She wore a knife at her belt and carried a Sharps rifle across her saddle. Not a woman who relied on others for protection. She studied me for a long moment. I waited. I had learned patience in the war. The man who moves first often dies first. When she finally spoke, her English was clear and unaccented. I need a man, she said, not for love, for fighting. I stared at her. Of all the things I had expected, this was not among them. You have the wrong person, I said. I do not fight anymore. You are Jacob Hartwell, former sergeant, survivor of Shiloh. She tilted her head slightly. The soldiers who served with you called you the man who cannot die. I have watched you for 7 days. You still move like a warrior, even with your wounded leg. You still sleep with your gun within reach. You still check every horizon before you step outside your door. The accuracy of her observations unsettled me deeply. Who are you? I asked. My name is Ayana. My father was chief of my people. 3 months ago, a man named Hank Brennan murdered him to take our land. I knew the name. Brennan owned the largest spread in the territory. He had arrived 5 years ago with money nobody could explain and had been buying, stealing, or killing his way to more ever since. The sheriff was in his pocket. So were most of the town officials. Rumor said he had killed a young Army lieutenant 2 years back, made it look like a Comanche raid. Nothing was ever proven. I am sorry for your loss, I said, but this is not my fight. Ayana did not argue. She simply said, Brennan has 200 cattle wearing your brand in his herd right now. He has been stealing from you for months. You did not notice because you do not count your animals. You do not care about anything anymore. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words died in my throat. She was right. I had stopped counting long ago. Even so, I said, one man against Brennan's outfit is suicide. He has 15 guns working for him. Not one man, Ayanna replied. My people have 12 warriors. I have found 3 white ranchers Brennan has wronged who will fight. With you, that makes 17 against 15, and we have something Brennan does not have. What is that? Nothing left to lose. Before I could respond, I smelled smoke. I turned toward my property and saw black clouds rising from the direction of my horse barn. 3 riders were silhouetted against the flames on the hill behind my cabin. Even at this distance, I could hear their laughter carrying on the wind. That is Brennan's answer, Ayanna said quietly. He knows I came to you. He is telling you to stay out of his business. I watched my barn burn. 3 horses were inside. Good animals that had served me faithfully for years. They screamed as the fire took them. The sound cut through me like a knife. Something shifted inside me. Something I had buried deep after Shiloh and tried to forget at Gettysburg. Something cold and patient and very dangerous. Where is your camp? I asked. The Apache camp lay hidden in a canyon 3 hours' ride into the mountains. 40 people lived there. Women, children, elders, and 12 warriors who looked at me with suspicion and hostility when I arrived. I did not blame them. White men had given them nothing but broken promises and bloody violence for as long as anyone could remember. Why should I be any different? The council met that night around a fire that cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Hota, Ayanna's uncle and the eldest of the group, presided. He was perhaps 60, with a face carved by decades of sun and hardship. His eyes missed nothing. Ayanna spoke first, explaining why she had brought me. Then she introduced the other allies. 3 ranchers from the valley whose cattle Brennan had stolen, whose homes Brennan had burned, whose families Brennan had threatened. Men with weathered hands and hard eyes. Men who understood that sometimes the only law was the one you made yourself. And then there was Dakota. He stood when Ayanna finished speaking. 35 years old, tall and powerfully built, with the bearing of a man who had never known defeat in battle. The warriors looked to him for leadership. Ayanna had been promised to him in marriage before her father died. This white man will betray us, Dakota said flatly. They always do. It is in their nature. I remained silent. Words would not convince him. Only actions would. Dakota stepped forward, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. You want to fight for us? Prove it. Face me now. The warriors formed a circle around us. I could feel their expectation, their hunger to see blood spilled. This was a test. Everything depended on how I handled it. I did not reach for my gun. Instead, I slowly unbuckled my gun belt and handed it to Ayanna. Her eyes widened slightly, but she took it without comment. I will not fight you, I said calmly. Dakota's lip curled in contempt. You are a coward. I am a survivor. There is a difference. I met his gaze without flinching. Brennan has 15 guns. We have 17, counting me. You want to make it 16 against 15 just to prove something to your warriors? That is not courage. That is stupidity. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. No one had ever spoken to Dakota this way. And what would you know of courage? Dakota demanded. I know that true courage is not about fighting. It is about knowing when to fight and when to wait. I paused. I have seen what happens when good people do nothing against evil. I have buried friends because I hesitated when I should have acted. I will not make that mistake again, but I will also not waste lives on meaningless displays of pride. For a long moment, Dakota did not move. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing nothing of his thoughts. Then slowly, his hand dropped from his knife. You speak like a war chief, he said grudgingly. I was one. A long time ago, before the war broke me. Something shifted in Dakota's expression. Not quite respect, but perhaps recognition. He too had seen friends die. He too carried wounds that did not show on the surface. We will see what you are worth when the fighting starts, he said finally. He turned and walked away into the darkness. Hota nodded slowly from his place by the fire. "We will fight together," he announced, "but if the white man betrays us, his death will be slow and painful." I nodded. It was fair. The next morning I rode into Silver Creek to buy ammunition and gather intelligence. The town was a typical frontier settlement. One main street lined with wooden buildings. A saloon, a general store, a livery stable, a sheriff's office. The sheriff himself was a fat man named Wheeler, who spent most of his time drinking whiskey and doing whatever Brennan told him. At the general store, I purchased 200 rounds of 44-40 ammunition from my Winchester, 50 rounds from my Colt, and a case of dynamite with blasting caps. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. "Planning to dig a well, Hartwell?" "Something like that," I replied without expression. I was loading my supplies onto my horse when Hank Brennan himself appeared. He was 45, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with a scar running from his left eye to his chin, the result of a knife fight, according to local legend. The other man had not survived. 3 of his riders flanked him. Their hands rested casually on their pistols, ready for trouble. "Heard you had some trouble at your place," Brennan said conversationally. "Barn fire. Real shame about those horses." "It was. Dangerous country out here. Things burn down all the time. People disappear and are never seen again." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Smart man would sell his land, take what he could get, and move somewhere safer." "Smart man would not steal another man's cattle," I replied. "But here we are." Brennan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You accusing me of something?" "I am stating a fact. 200 head with my brand in your herd? I want them back." He laughed. The sound held no warmth, no humor. "Prove it." "I intend to, one way or another." For a moment I thought he would draw his weapon right there in the street. His hand twitched toward his gun. But we were in the middle of town, in broad daylight, with witnesses watching from every doorway and window. Even Sheriff Wheeler could not overlook murder under those circumstances. "You are making a mistake, Hartwell," Brennan said softly. "A fatal one." "Probably," I agreed. "But I have been making fatal mistakes for 20 years. Still breathing." I mounted my horse and rode out of town without looking back. I could feel his eyes burning into my back the entire way. That night we struck. The target was Brennan's southern cattle camp, where my stolen animals were being held. 8 guards, according to Ayana's scouts. We had 16 fighters. Dakota led the assault. I had expected him to resent my presence to try to prove himself superior, but something had shifted during our confrontation at the council. He still did not fully trust me, but he respected competence. And during our planning sessions, I had identified weaknesses in Brennan's defenses that even his own warriors had missed. The placement of guards, the timing of their rotations, the best angles of approach. We moved through the darkness like ghosts, communicating with hand signals and bird calls. Dakota and 2 warriors handled the perimeter guards. Silent, efficient, deadly. 3 men died without making a sound. By the time the others realized something was wrong, it was too late. I cut the fence while Ayana provided overwatch from a ridge 300 yards away. Through the darkness, I could just make out her silhouette against the stars. The Sharp's rifle in her hands was steady as stone. The cattle began moving, 150 head, drifting north toward Apache territory. We were almost clear when a dog started barking. Everything happened very fast after that. A guard stumbled out of his tent, rifle in hand. He saw me in the moonlight. He raised his weapon to fire. I shot him through the chest before he could pull the trigger. The sound of my Winchester echoed through the canyon like thunder. More guards emerged from their tents, shouting in confusion. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as our people engaged. Dakota appeared beside me, his knife bloody. "Time to go!" We ran for the horses. Behind us, the camp dissolved into chaos. Men shouting, guns firing wildly into the darkness. But we had achieved our objective. The cattle were moving north, and they would not be stopped. We rode hard for 2 hours before stopping to rest the horses. No pursuit. Brennan's men had been too disorganized, too confused to follow. We had struck like lightning and vanished like smoke. Dakota sat down beside me as I checked my Winchester for damage. "You shoot well for a cripple," he said. There was no mockery in his voice now, only acknowledgement. "You move well for someone so loud," I replied. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his weathered face. "My father taught me to move silently, before the soldiers killed him at Sand Creek." I nodded slowly. There was nothing to say to that. We both carried the weight of dead fathers, dead friends, dead pieces of ourselves that could never be recovered. Perhaps that was why we understood each other. "Brennan will come for us now," I said. "Yes, with everything he has." "Are your people ready for that?" Dakota looked toward the mountains, where the first light of dawn was painting the peaks in shades of gold and crimson. "We have been ready for a long time. We were just waiting for something worth fighting for." The retaliation came 3 days later, but not in the way any of us expected. A rider approached our camp under a white flag. He was young, barely 20, and his hands trembled as he delivered his message. He carried a note from Brennan. Ayanna read it aloud, her face growing pale with each word. "He has hostages, a family of settlers, a man named Peterson, his wife, 2 children. He says if you do not surrender yourself within 24 hours, he will hang them all from the gates of his ranch." I took the note and read it myself. The handwriting was crude, but the meaning was crystal clear. Brennan had found a way to draw me out, and he knew I could not refuse. "It is a trap," Dakota said immediately. "He will kill you the moment you appear. Then he will kill the hostages anyway." "Probably. Then you cannot go. Those settlers are not our people. Their fate is not our concern." I looked at him steadily. "They are someone's people, a father, a mother, children who have done nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time." I paused. "I cannot let them die because of me. If I do, I become no different from Brennan." Ayanna stepped forward, her dark eyes thoughtful. "There may be another way. What if you go, but not alone? What if your surrender is nothing but a distraction while our warriors attack from behind?" I considered the plan carefully. It was risky. Everything would depend on perfect timing. One mistake, and we would all die. But it was better than letting an innocent family be murdered. "One condition," I said. "Dakota leads the attack. He knows his warriors better than I ever could." Dakota studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he extended his hand. I grasped it firmly. "If you died tomorrow," he said, "I will tell stories of your courage around our fires." "If I live," I replied, "you can buy me a drink." Brennan's main camp sprawled across a valley 15 miles south of Silver Creek, a fortified ranch house surrounded by outbuildings, 15 armed men patrolling the perimeter, and 4 hostages tied to posts in the center of the compound, clearly visible to anyone approaching. I rode in alone at high noon. The sun beat down mercilessly on my back. Sweat ran down my face and soaked my shirt beneath my coat. But my hands were steady on the reins. My breathing was calm and measured. This was not my first time riding into certain death. The war had taught me how to face the end with dignity. 12 guns tracked my approach as I entered the compound. I kept my hands visible on the saddle horn, my horse at a slow walk. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn and run. I ignored them all. Brennan waited on the porch of the ranch house, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Behind him, through the open door, I could see more armed men. Insurance. The hostages slumped against their posts in the hot sun. The 2 children were crying softly. The mother was praying, her lips moving in silent supplication. The father stared at me with desperate hope burning in his eyes. Hartwell. Brennan descended the porch steps slowly, savoring the moment. I genuinely did not think you would come. I thought you would run like the coward you are. You gave me no choice. There is always a choice. You just made the wrong one. He smiled coldly. But I appreciate the sentiment. Truly, it is almost noble. I dismounted carefully, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. No sudden gestures that might provoke nervous trigger fingers. Before I kill you, Brennan continued, I want to know where the Apache are hiding. Tell me, and I might let these settlers live. I do not know where they are. He struck me across the face with the back of his hand. My vision exploded into stars. I tasted blood on my lips. Try again. I told you, I do not know. He hit me again, harder this time. I fell to my knees, the world spinning around me. Blood dripped from my mouth onto the dusty ground. You are lying, he snarled. That Apache woman brought you to their camp. You know exactly where they are. Tell me now, or I start with the children. I spat blood onto the dirt and looked up at him through swollen eyes. You want to know where the Apache are, Brennan? Yes. He leaned closer, eager. I smiled through bloody teeth. Behind you. The first shot came from the ridge to the east. One of Brennan's men spun and dropped with a hole in his chest. Before anyone could react, more shots rang out from 3 other directions. Dakota and his warriors poured from the tree line like avenging spirits. They had approached through a dry creek bed that ran behind the compound, invisible until they were within striking distance. Now they emerged with rifles blazing and war cries splitting the air. I threw myself sideways as Brennan reached for his gun. My hand found the small derringer I had hidden in my boot. A tiny weapon, only 2 shots, but at close range it would do the job. Brennan fired. The bullet tore through my left arm, spinning me around in a spray of blood. I landed hard on my back, the world flickering between darkness and blinding light. But the derringer was still clutched in my right hand. He loomed over me, blocking out the sun. His gun pointed directly at my face. Goodbye, Hartwell. A knife flew through the air and buried itself deep in Brennan's shoulder. He screamed in pain and rage, stumbling backward. Ayanna appeared from nowhere, another knife already in her hand, ready to throw. But Brennan was faster than he looked. He grabbed her by the hair and pulled her in front of him as a human shield, pressing the barrel of his pistol against her temple. Stop, he screamed. Blood poured from his shoulder wound, soaking his shirt. Everyone stop shooting or she dies. The gunfire ceased abruptly. Dakota and his warriors froze in place, their weapons trained on Brennan but unable to shoot without hitting Ayanna. I rose slowly to my feet, my wounded arm hanging useless at my side. The derringer was concealed against my leg, hidden from Brennan's view. Let her go, I said quietly. This is between you and me. Always has been. Brennan laughed wildly. Madness danced in his eyes. You think I am stupid? You think I will just let her walk away so you can put a bullet in me? Ayanna's voice was calm despite the gun at her head. He does not think you are stupid. He thinks you are slow. She moved with the speed of a striking snake. Her boots stamped down hard on Brennan's instep. Her head snapped back into his face with a sickening crunch. His grip loosened for just a fraction of a second. She twisted away, hitting the ground and rolling clear. I raised the derringer and fired twice. Both bullets struck Brennan in the center of his chest. He staggered backward, a look of absolute disbelief spreading across his brutal face. The pistol fell from his fingers. You, he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. You had a hidden gun. I always have a hidden gun, I said. That is how I survived Shiloh. He fell to his knees, swayed for a moment, then collapsed face first into the dust. He did not move again. The remaining members of his gang threw down their weapons immediately. They had seen their leader fall. The fight had gone out of them completely. I sat down heavily, my vision graying at the edges from blood loss. The wound in my arm was bleeding badly, pumping crimson with each heartbeat. Ayana was beside me instantly, pressing cloth against the injury with firm hands. "You need a doctor," she said. "There is no doctor within 50 miles of here." "Then I will have to do." She smiled slightly. "I have practiced with stubborn men who refuse to die." I looked around the battlefield. 8 of Brennan's men lay dead in the dust. 5 more were wounded. Dakota was already organizing the prisoners, his warriors moving with efficient precision. The settler Peterson stumbled toward me, his wife and children clinging to him desperately. His wrists were raw and bloody from the ropes. Tears streamed down his weathered face. "You came for us," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "You did not even know us, and you came. You risked everything." "No one deserves to die for another man's greed," I replied. He gripped my hand with both of his, squeezing so hard it hurt. "I will not forget this. Ever. If you ever need anything, anything at all, get your family somewhere safe. That is all I ask." He nodded, unable to speak further. His wife was sobbing with relief. The children stared at me with wide eyes, too young to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to know they had almost died. Our victory celebration was cut short by the sound of approaching horses, many horses. The thunder of hooves shook the ground. "Cavalry," Dakota said grimly. "At least 50 riders. They come to finish what Brennan started." I forced myself to stand despite the pain. "Let me talk to them. Maybe I can buy you time to escape." "You can barely stand." "I can stand enough." The cavalry unit reined in at the edge of the compound in a cloud of dust. Their commanding officer rode forward alone, a silver oak leaf on his shoulder identifying him as a major. He was perhaps 50 years old, with gray hair and weary eyes that had witnessed too much death and suffering. He surveyed the carnage with a practiced gaze. The bodies, the bound prisoners, the Apache warriors standing ready but not aggressive. Finally, his eyes settled on me. "Hartwell," he said, "I thought I recognized you. You were with the Pennsylvania 23rd at Gettysburg, held the line when everyone else was running. Major Crawford, you commanded the artillery battery on our left flank. Your guns saved us more than once." He nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile crossing his lips. "I heard you were out here somewhere, trying to disappear from the world." It did not work out as planned. Crawford dismounted and walked through the battlefield, examining everything with the careful attention of a professional soldier. He stopped beside Brennan's body and stared down at it for a long moment. "This man was a murderer, a thief, and a coward," he said finally. "We have files on him going back 3 years. He had powerful friends in Washington who protected him from justice." He paused, and something dark and personal crossed his weathered face. "He also killed a young lieutenant under my command 2 years ago, a good man with a wife and newborn son. Brennan made it look like a Comanche raid. I could never prove it, but I always knew the truth." "Then why did you never arrest him?" I asked. "Politics, orders, chains of command, the same things that bind every soldier and prevent us from doing what is right." Crawford looked at the body again. "You did what I could not. I will not forget that." "What about the Apache?" He was silent for what felt like an eternity. I could see him wrestling with duty and conscience, orders and morality. "My official orders are to relocate all hostile Indians to the reservation at San Carlos," he said finally. "These people are not hostile," I replied firmly. "They defended their land and their families against a man who murdered their chief and stole everything they had. If that makes them hostile, then every white settler in this territory is guilty of the same crime." Crawford looked at Dakota, at Ayana, at the children peering from behind their mother's skirts with frightened eyes. I do not see any hostile Indians here, he said slowly. I see only the aftermath of a dispute between cattle ranchers. Tragic, but not unusual. He gathered his reins. You have 24 hours, Hartwell. After that, I will have to follow my orders, regardless of my personal feelings. Use the time wisely. He led his cavalry column away without looking back. The camp dissolved quickly. The Apache knew how to vanish into the wilderness. Within 2 hours, there was no sign they had ever been there. I stood beside my horse, watching them prepare for the long journey north. Canada lay beyond the mountains. It would be a difficult passage through dangerous territory, but it offered something the United States could not, a chance to live free. Dakota approached me as the last of the travelers assembled. You are welcome among us, he said. You fought well. You bled for our people when you had no obligation to do so. That makes you one of us, regardless of the color of your skin. Hota nodded in agreement. The land where we are going is good and empty. It needs men who know how to build. Men who can teach our young warriors the ways of the white man's weapons. I looked back toward the south. My cabin was gone, burned to ashes by Brennan's men. My cattle were scattered across the territory. Everything I had built over 3 years of lonely labor was nothing but ashes and bitter memories. Ayana approached me as I tightened the cinch on my saddle. Her arm was bandaged where a bullet had grazed her during the battle. She had not complained once. You could stay here, she said quietly. Find another piece of land. Start over again. You have done it before. I looked at her carefully. In the golden afternoon light, the scar on her jaw caught the sun. We had both been marked by violence. We had both lost everything and survived. Perhaps that was why I understood her. Perhaps that was why she had chosen me. I have been starting over for 14 years, I said, running from one place to another. Maybe it is finally time to stop running and start building something that will last. She nodded slowly. The land where we are going is hard. The winters are brutal and unforgiving. Many will not survive the first year. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Something passed between us then. Not love, not yet. That would come later, if it came at all. But recognition, understanding. Two warriors who had found each other in the chaos of a dying world. Then ride with us, Jacob Hartwell. I mounted my horse and took my place in the column. Dakota rode up beside me as we began moving north. The journey will be long and dangerous, he said. Many weeks through difficult country. There will be other enemies along the way, other battles to fight. I know. You are truly ready for this? To leave everything behind? I thought about his question carefully before answering. I thought about the war, about Shiloh and Gettysburg and all the blood I had shed. I thought about 3 years of hiding from the world and from myself. I thought about the man I had been and the man I had become. I have been waiting my whole life for something worth fighting for, I said finally. I think I have finally found it. We rode north together as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Behind us, the old world faded into shadow and memory. Ahead, something new was beginning, something uncertain but filled with possibility. I did not know what waited for us in Canada. I did not know if we would all survive the journey, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty, a certainty I had not felt since before the war shattered everything I believed. I was done hiding from life, I was done running from my past, and I was done being alone. The road ahead would be hard. There would be more enemies, more battles, more blood. But for the first time in 14 years, I looked toward the future instead of the past. And I liked what I saw. But the road to Canada was longer than any of us imagined. And I would soon learn that Brennan was not the last enemy waiting for us in those mountains. Some fights, it turned out, were only just beginning.